Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Gravity Falls build series. So far in Animal Crossing, we have built the Mystery Shack, the Northwest Manor, Lil Gideon's house, Seuss's house, Greasy's diner, and the author's bunker. And today we are moving on to our 7th build, which will be Robbie's house, also known as the Valentino Funeral Home. Everyone loves Robbie, Gravity Falls' little moody emo teenager, and even if you don't love him, a secret part of you still does. While trying to decide what home to design next, I was between Robbie's house or Wendy's house, seeing as they are both important characters in the show. And seeing how we barely see Wendy's home at all, yet we see the cemetery quite often and it's an important landmark in Gravity Falls. And I wanted to include it in my build anyways. I figured we'd go the Robbie route and build the funeral home since it's attached to the cemetery. Also, yes, it's been a while since I've done a build video. Hi everyone, I'm so sorry. I ran into a bit of a creative block, but as you can see, I've been experimenting once again with the outdoors area, and I'm trying to lay out the town in my mind and decide where every home and landmark will go. There are so many areas in Gravity Falls I want to include on my island. I just don't know how I'm going to fit it all in, but I'm going to try my best to make it look as faithful to the show as possible. And while this process has been slow going, I am determined to finish my Gravity Falls island. So to those that have been following along, thank you so much for your patience. I'm still working on it, and hopefully it'll be done before the next Animal Crossing title is released. Anyways, this will be the last home build of the series. I am planning an 8th home, but I've decided to keep it a secret alongside the villagers' homes. I want there to be a bit of mystery and excitement when I do my island tour. I'm also not sure how much, if any, of the outdoor builds I'll film. If you guys would like a few episodes of me designing the outside of the island, please let me know. I do want to keep some surprises for the island tour, but filming a few specific island designs may be fun. Back to today's build, we only see 2 rooms in the Valentino's funeral home, the living room and Robbie's room, so we'll definitely be designing both of those. As for the other 4 rooms, I've created my own designs and we'll be building a gift shop, a graveyard, a chapel, and of course, a morgue. I had a ton of fun with this build and I can't wait for you guys to see the finished results. So let's head on in and start designing our 7th home. The first room we'll be building will be the Valentino's living room, which is a room we actually do see in the show. It's a very warm room with a bunch of paintings, urns, and an unsettling casket just plopped in the center with a sleeping patron inside, fresh from the morgue. Robbie's parents are quite interesting to say the least, and are also extremely cheery for a bunch of funeral directors. But that's what makes them so fun, as they are the exact polar opposite of their emo son, and what you'd least expect from morticians. I've done my best to recreate the feeling of the living room as best as I could, even though we only get to see one perspective of the room, so I had to add a lot of items that seem to fit in with the vibes. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. For the floors, I went with the natural wood flooring, as the floors are a lighter wood color in the show, and for the walls, I chose the white delicate blooms wall. In the show, the wall is a cream color with a blackish brown headboard, and this was the closest wallpaper I could find that matched that vibe. I think it looks nice and adds some warmth to the space. Next, I'm adding the large furniture pieces and then we'll place them around the room. First, I customized this couch to match the large blue and white striped chair they have in their living room, and it's really similar to the couch. So much so that I was giggling with joy when I customized it because it's almost a perfect match. Next to the chair, we see a small circular wooden side table, so I went ahead and added one. On the same wall, I added a large standing clock, as it fit the vibes I'm going for, alongside a simple potted plant to add a bit of color contrast to the space. Like I said, we don't get many perspectives of this space, so I had to add pieces I thought would be fitting, which included a cozy fireplace and some knights placed by the doorway. They seemed to fit the mood, and I thought they were a fun addition. I also added 2 dark wooden tables, as you do see a dark wooden table with various urns placed on top in the living room. The living room in the show seems very put together and slightly fancy, so a grand piano seemed like a nice addition to the home. I can see his parents playing a joyful, upbeat tune on the piano as families come to mourn, blissfully unaware that it's inappropriate to do so. I added a large vase near the piano. I'm pretending it's a glorious and ancient urn. okay? I added a simple red piano seat, placed a second wooden table near the piano, and placed the golden coffin in the middle of the room, like we see in the show. I wish there were other coffin options, but as this is the only one in the game, it's good enough. Alright, time for the smaller detailed items. And we'll start by adding a small plant and a phonograph on top of the fireplace mantle to add a bit of music and additional greenery to the space. When you're surrounded by death, adding a bit of life in the form of plants is a much welcomed addition, I think. I also added another large vase to the room, pretending it's also another large and decorated urn. I then added a golden urn to the wooden dresser alongside a fancy bowl of fruit. I like to pretend that they are the grapes seen on the cheese board the dad is holding. Next, I added another vase, but again, let's pretend it's a unique looking urn, and some flowers, which of course you'd find in a funeral home. On the side table near the couch, I added a lamp which resembles the one from the show, and finally, I added a bunch of fancy looking snacks on top of the coffin. We see a snack plate left on top of the coffin in the living room, so I wanted to add a fancy spread that guests can choose from. Also, there are no cheese plates in the game that I'm aware of, so fancy desserts it is. Next, let's add 2 white round carpets. We see a smaller round carpet near the striped couch, and honestly, perfect match. Love when that happens. And to add a bit of balance, I added a larger white carpet to go on the opposite side of the room under the piano, and it looks pretty nice. Okay, now we are moving on to wall items, and for the most part, it's a bunch of paintings. You see a lot of graveyard and gravestone paintings on the wall, so I tried to pick out the darker and more depressing paintings. I added a few wall lights to add some warmth to the space, and added a black key holder on the wall, since we see a section with keys hanging on the wall in their house from the show. Once I had all of those items in their proper places, I went ahead and added a glass lamp to the ceiling above the coffin, just a simple gray light fixture. At first, I wasn't sure about the dull colors, but it stands out amongst the warmth in the room, so I kind of like it, I suppose. Final touches, I'm going to make the room a bit warmer to make it a more comforting space, while ignoring the coffin in the middle of the room, of course. Next, I went ahead and added some classical piano music to the room, and with that, we are done. I think this space turned out really nice. It's warm enough to welcome grieving clients, yet a tad morbid with the coffin, knights, and urns scattered about. It has a bit of a funeral home feel to it, yes? I wish there were more funeral items, but overall, I'm enjoying the final results, especially since many of the pieces were my own additions, as we don't get to see every angle of the living room in the show. A bit warm and a bit creepy, a perfect clash for a funeral home's living room. Alright, next we'll be moving on to a few original room builds I came up with, so let's head into the next room and start our build. The second room is a simple design, and I decided to build a little gift shop in the home, stocked full with urns, flowers, and stuffed animals. It seemed like a fitting area as their home is also their business, and people tend to buy objects to comfort themselves and their loved ones to help deal with grief, yes? So a tiny little gift shop seemed like a good addition. It's nothing drastic or detailed, but contains items you'd expect to find in a gift shop inside or near a funeral home. Let's start with walls and floors. For the floors, I chose the dark herringbone floors, and for the walls, I went with the black hallway wall. I wanted the space to be dark, as I don't think people would appreciate a cheery and bright space when they are purchasing items for a funeral, you know? The first round of items we'll be adding are a few of the tall island counters and a few of the small island counters. These items will act as our gift shop shelves. I also added a dark counter table to act as the checkout area. Alright, now that the counters are in place, let's add all of our merchandise. For the shelves behind the counter, I added 3 different colored urns. It's always a good idea to have a variety of options, even for these types of situations. The shelves on the right of the room contain 6 different colored stuffed animals people can buy, my favorite being the purple bunny rocking the eye patch. I placed a cash register and a speaker on the checkout stand. Gotta have a bit of music in this dark and depressing space. And for the final shelves on the left, we have 6 different flower arrangements for sale, 3 white and 3 dark. Next, I added a few sconce lights on the walls to add a warm, comforting glow to the room, as well as a fancy chandelier above the register. I feel like the center of the room was a bit too empty, and I really liked how the light fixture looked. It makes the space feel a bit more elegant and mature. Final touches, I turned down the lights so only the warm glow from the lamps are seen throughout, allowing the room to feel a bit more comforting. And I added a bit of classical piano music to the space to fill the silent void, and we are done. Like I said, a very simple room, but I like the idea of adding a little gift shop in the home as it also functions as their business. The objects also help solidify this as a funeral home with the urns, flowers, and comforting plush animals. And who knows, maybe Robbie helps man this gift shop for his parents when they have customers coming over to deal with family affairs. Although, I'm not sure if his presence would be comforting to those who are grieving. Okay, let's move on to our next original room build, which will be the chapel. Sometimes funeral homes will have chapels attached to them or have one somewhere on the property for families to use for their funerals or memorial services. So I figured that would also be a good addition to this home build, and we will be building this room right across the hall from the gift shop, so let's get started. I'd like to state right away that this room was heavily inspired by a screenshot I found online of a chapel build someone else designed in Animal Crossing, and I loved it so much that I decided to recreate it. I changed a few aspects of the design, but I felt it was the perfect addition to this small little funeral home, as it's important to have a dedicated place for grieving. Alright, walls and floors first, and I went with the basic dark wooden flooring, and for the walls, I chose the brown wedding wallpaper. I really like the large stained glass windows, as they closely resemble those you'd see in your typical church or chapel. Next, we'll add most of the items used in the room. There aren't too many, as I wanted to keep it rather simple and clean looking. Alright, first, I placed 4 different flower arrangements towards the back of the chapel. I made them all white to match the flowers on the benches. I also added a golden coffin, as this room is currently set up for a memorial service, and as such, a coffin is a fitting item. On either side of the coffin, I added 2 instruments, a harp and a violin. Figured someone could hire musicians to play calming music for any services held in this room. I kind of like the vibe they bring to this space. The 4 wedding benches I customized to this dark wood color with the white flowers to look more like your typical church and chapel benches. I placed 2 on each side of the room, giving plenty of room for a walkway and plenty of seating for people to grieve and pray and think in this space as they see fit. Next, we have 2 more small items to add to the room, a portrait and some candles. Candles are fitting in situations like this, so I added a few, and we have a portrait of Pecan, as apparently this is her memorial service. She passed away from being so stinking cute. Speaking of candles, I added a few to the walls. Candles and chapels go well together, and I thought adding some candles to the walls could help elevate this space. They bring a sad yet warm feeling to the room. I also decided to add a golden candle chandelier to the middle of the room to add even more candles and warmth to the space. I think it looks rather nice and comforting, don't you? Alright, last touches, I changed the lighting in the room to a warmer orange tone and added a healing soundscape to the room. It seemed like the perfect ambiance for this type of room. And there we go. The funeral home's chapel is completed. What do you guys think? Is this a good addition to the home? It's pretty simple, but I really like the final results. Since we only see 2 of the rooms in the home in the show, I had 4 I needed to come up with, and what better than a little chapel where families can say goodbye to their loved ones. Let's just hope Robbie's parents will let the families do their own thing while grieving, because with their nonchalant, cheery attitude, I feel like all they would do is further upset their patrons. Alright, well, we have the gift shop to purchase services and items for the dearly departed, a chapel to hold services to say goodbye, and now we need a graveyard, the final resting place for these unfortunate souls. That will be our next room build, so let's head to the final room on the first floor and get started. On to room build number 4, and I decided to integrate a smaller section of the larger graveyard that is found on the Valentino's property. I plan to build a bit of the graveyard outside of their home as well, but hey, why not include a bit of that spooky vibe inside the home as well? The room is rather simple, as you can probably imagine, so let's get started. Since this is meant to be outdoors, I chose a grass flooring, and for the walls, I went with the graveyard wallpaper. I've always wanted to use it in a build, and this was the perfect opportunity to do so. I love the 3D elements of this option and the spooky vibes it brings. All of the headstones give it a nice touch as well. Moving on to the items, and as you can imagine, there aren't that many. First, I added 2 dead trees to the back of the room to add some dimension. You do see a bunch of trees in their graveyard, and this wallpaper has a pretty similar similar looking tree, so it's rather fitting. Next, I placed 3 gravestones next to each other because what's a graveyard without some gravestones? Am I right? I also thought it would be funny to add a wheelchair as a reference to the previous mayor of Gravity Falls who passed away. During the episode where Dipper summons all of the undead, you see Robbie's parents pushing the reanimated mayor back into his grave plot, all while laughing as if it's no big deal. So I added the wheelchair and a set of bones next to it to reference that. The mayor has obviously seen better days. And because Gravity Falls is full of the strange and unusual, let's add a creepy swirl of black magic above the remains of the previous mayor. Maybe it's leftover magic from the spell Dipper recited, or perhaps a bad omen of what's to come. But in a town like Gravity Falls, seeing something like this would be considered normal. I turned off the lights to enhance the spooky vibes and added some wind sounds to complete the creepy looking nighttime graveyard feel I was going for. And with that, we are done with room number 4. I really like how this space turned out, and it's a really nice addition to this particular home build. Like I said before, I plan to build more graveyard space outside of the home, but it's nice to be able to have a bit of the graveyard shrouded in darkness with the spooky wallpaper to match. Robbie seems to like the space at the very least. All that's missing is a photo of Wendy, an empty plot for him to crawl into, and a dash of whining, desperation, and self-loathing. Then, it'd be a perfect environment for him to thrive. Next, we'll be heading to the basement to build our last original room in the home, so let's head downstairs. Alright, we're missing one very important room for the funeral home that every single funeral home must have. The room no one but the funeral directors themselves may enter, and that is the morgue. Yes, the creepiest of creepy rooms. The name itself gives me the heebie-jeebies. But I had to add this room to the home, and what better place to put it than the basement? The creepiest room in any home. You don't see this room at all in the show, so once again, this is an original design, but I truly like how it turned out. Alright, let's start with the walls and the floors. I wanted the room to have a very clean and sterile feel to it, as that seems to be important in this line of work. So I chose the simple white flooring, as it has a very similar look to concrete and looks easy to clean. And for the walls, I chose some basic white tiles, which also look easy to clean. The easy to clean materials seem important when dealing with the deceased, you know? Next, I'm going to add a good chunk of the larger items, and for this room, I decided to split the space into 2 workstations. One section will have cabinets, computers, and all the record-keeping aspects of this job, and the other section will cover the more hands-on parts of the job. Okay, to start off, I placed a medical desk against the right wall and added a tree beside it. This space could use a bit of life in it. I added a filing cabinet next to the plant that I imagine holds medical records and reports, and I also added an anatomical model next to the desk, as this item seems to fit rather well in this setting. I added a gurney type of bed in front of the cabinet, which I imagine is used to transfer people down to this room, and I added another type of storage cabinet on the other side of the desk. Next to the additional filing cabinet, I placed a shelf full of weird glowing green jars. Maybe they're specimens from various cadavers that the Valentinos are studying. Maybe they collected them from all the zombies that roamed Gravity Falls not too long ago. I mean, I gotta add some sort of weird items down here. On the opposite side of the room, I added 2 metal counters so I can add various tools and supplies on top. Metal surfaces are often seen in facilities like this, as they are usually quite clean and sanitary, so everything on this side of the room will be metal. Next, I added a barrel of questionable liquid. I like to imagine it contains embalming fluid or something similar. Right next to that item, I added a large sink. I'm sure fast and easy cleanup is appreciated in this setting. I placed another human model in the room, this time a simple skeleton, to use as a reference while they're working, you know? And right next to this guy is an IV bag, but I'm going to pretend it's used to administer the embalming fluid into the cadavers, okay? Let's use our imagination here, guys. For the cremation chamber, I placed this black brick pizza oven, keeping the doors closed because there is a pizza inside, but I wanted to find something to use for a cremation area, and I felt this worked pretty well. Next item is a medical cabinet with a bunch of different bottles and medical items, and right next to it, I placed a simple cart with various tools that they use frequently when doing their work. This metal table will take the place of the examiner's table, as it's the longest metal table I was able to find, alongside a metal bowl to collect organs and other bodily items, a metal chair to sit on while working, and of course, we need a patient for our table, so this poor unfortunate soul will have to do. Now that all our larger items are in place, we'll go ahead and add the smaller detailed items to the room. Alright, first I added some blue trash bags on top of the shelf that are full of medical waste, and another mysterious glowing jar right next to that. On the cabinet next to the shelf, I placed a Libra scale, as it seemed like an item that would fit in this space. And next to the scale, I placed a few books. On top of the other filing cabinet, I added a speaker to play some music, and a fax machine that they use to send and receive important documents related to their job. Next, I placed a chainsaw on top of the medical cabinet because I thought it was funny. Knowing Robbie's parents, I'm sure they've used it a few times in their line of work. And right next to the chainsaw, I placed an urn. Is it currently occupied? Who knows? Alright, moving on to the metal workstation, I added a mask that they use from time to time while performing their autopsies, a cooler that may or may not contain body parts, a telescope to examine blood and tissue samples, and a scale to weigh organs or body parts during examinations. All fun items that people love to think about on the daily, right? Nothing more fun than thinking about your own demise. Finally, I placed a blue trash can next to the shelf of jars to add more medical waste when needed. Next, we'll be moving on to wall items, and I try to add pieces that seem to fit well with the morgue setting, as well as add some touches of the awkwardly cheery parents' personalities spread throughout the room. Alright, let's organize all of these items, and on this wall, I added some fun and lighthearted items, a cheery and colorful looking pinboard above their desk, a cute little raccoon clock, and a poster of Stitches, which made me laugh. Like I said, they have an obnoxiously cheery demeanor, so why not add a few items to show that off? I also added a phone for obvious reasons. Next wall, I added a plaque and a diploma, showing that they are, in fact, qualified and competent enough to do this job, as unrealistic as that may seem. I added a knife rack above the tool cart as I found it dramatic looking, and thus, it made me laugh, and another human sketch above the skeleton. Third wall, I added 2 shelves with various bottles on top, and yet another official looking plaque. And for the final wall, 2 more happy and adorable posters about beaches and getaways. More sunshiny posters to match their sunshiny demeanor. I also added a broom for cleaning up and a simple breaker box. We are just about done, and we'll finish by adding our last few items, which are a few ceiling items. I placed a simple black overhead light above the examination table and 6 fluorescent lights scattered throughout the rest of the room. I turned the lights down just a bit to soften the atmosphere a little, and next we'll add some music. And I mean, of course I had to add the bubbliest, cutest song in the game. I can imagine Robbie's parents listening to happy pop music while working down here. It fits them so well. Last thing on the docket, we are going to add more of these ominous black swirls to our unfortunate human friend here, because something strange is happening in Gravity Falls, but when is it not? And with that, we are done with the morgue. Alright, that was fun. I really enjoyed this room build, and I love how it turned out. It has elements of your typical morgue mixed with elements of the kooky Valentino parents. I knew I had to include this room in the house, and I'm so glad I did. It's spooky, but not too spooky. And despite the game having a limited amount of funeral-related items, it turned out relatively well, and I think most people would stumble upon this room and understand what it is. Okay, we are moving on to our last room build, and it's the second and only other room we see in the home, and it's none other than Robbie's bedroom. So let's head upstairs and get started. As you can probably imagine, Robbie's room is quite dark, quite messy, and full of a bunch of emo posters, graffiti, and guitars. It's a fun space, and I had a blast designing it. I tried to stay true to the screenshots of his bedroom from the show, but I also added a few original items that I felt would go well with his personality, as well as a few reference items from other Robbie moments in the show. My main goal was to capture the vibes of his room, and I feel as if I accomplished that for the most part. But as always, if you have any suggestions on items I can add or replace, let me know. Okay, let's get started, and we'll start with the walls and floors. Robbie has a brown carpet in his room, and since there are no brown carpets, we'll substitute that for some dark wood flooring. And for the walls, I chose a blue colored wallpaper. His room is seen in the dark, and while I think his walls are probably a white or gray color, he has various black lights on throughout the space, casting a darker blue hue on the walls. Thus, I chose a blue color to make the room look dark. Now let's add a bunch of the larger pieces of furniture for this space, and then we'll start placing them in their proper spots. And this room has a lot of items in it, so buckle up. First, I place a drum set in the room, as we see an old busted drum set lying around near the entrance to his room. Next to the drums, I placed a simple table, as we see one in the show with either a computer monitor or a TV placed on top. I added this alien claw machine to the space as well, since we see a few different alien items in his room, and I kind of like how it looked. It seems like something Robbie might have, and reminds me a bit of when he was trying to win that stuffed animal for Wendy at the fair. Since the room is seen to have black lights that illuminate neon paint and clocks, I decided to add 2 lava lamps to add more neons and bright colors in the room to mimic that feeling. Next, I added a simple metal dresser. I like the metal design as it seems to fit Robbie's aesthetic. As a reference to the episode where Dipper brings the video game character Rumble McSkirmish to life to beat Robbie up, this game looks extremely similar to Rumble's arcade game, so I added it. We see a large speaker in his room as well, so I added a large stereo in its place. And to add more shelving, I placed this black shed against the wall. Robbie is seen to have like a coffin-like bookshelf in his room, so weird pieces of furniture aren't really out of place, and actually quite fitting. On the right wall, I added a simple short dresser that is extremely similar to the one we see in Robbie's room, alongside a red tool cart. We see a red plastic bin turned on its side with a bunch of random items scattered inside, and it's around the same height as the tool cart, so I figured this was a nice replacement item. I added 2 lockers to add more surfaces and storage in the room. Again, they seem like something Robbie would have. And this room is pretty big, so I needed to fill it with unique and interesting cabinets and dressers. I added another lava lamp in this corner since you see a bunch of neons lit up by black lights above his bed. And next to it, I added a desk. You also see a very messy desk near this corner of the room, so I chose this desk as it has trash and food piled underneath. Next, I added an amp because Robbie and his friends are in a band and he plays guitar, so it's an item that makes sense in his room. Let's add a few more larger pieces to the room, as well as a few items that will serve as additional surfaces for smaller knickknacks. Right next to the small dresser, I placed this dartboard game, as we see a dartboard hanging on the wall in this area with a picture of Dipper placed in the middle. I placed some shoe boxes in this corner to add a bit of clutter, along with a plastic bin, which we do see in his room. For his bed, I customized this messy bed with a blue and purple blanket, as his comforter is shown to have a blue and purple quilted puffy pattern on it, so it works really well. I added a simple chair near his desk and 2 guitars. Robbie is actually seen with a guitar, and we see 2 in his room, an acoustic black guitar and an electric blue guitar. So I added both and placed them in random spots. Now we'll be adding our 3rd round of items, which will be the smaller, more detailed items in the room. The small details are what brings these rooms to life, you know? And I've done my best to add items that would fit in Robbie's room, but as always, I'm open to suggestions and criticism. All right, let's start with his laptop. We see a gray laptop on Robbie's desk, and it has a skull sticker on the back, so I customized the wallpaper of the laptop with this cool skull pattern. Next to that laptop, we see an orange-yellow can of spray paint, so I customized this spray can item with a yellow label and placed it on the desk. In the section with the 2 black lockers, we see a coffin-shaped bookcase in the show with an opened paint can on top. So I placed these vibrant colored paint cans on top of one of the lockers. And I added a boombox on the other locker as a reference to the episode where Robbie was holding up the boombox playing sappy music outside of the shack, trying to win Wendy back after they broke up. Throughout Robbie's room, we see various cans and food wrappers everywhere, so I decided to add some snacks throughout the space and added some chips on top of the red bin next to his desk. We also see a black skateboard leaning against one of his walls, so I added a simple black skateboard near his blue guitar, and more neon paint cans to sit on top of the metal dresser. And of course, I had to add the spaghetti dish that Mabel brings up to Robbie's room. It's in the cuter form of a smiley face in the show, but still, I had to add it. Next, I added this danger sign on the pile of shoe boxes. We see a bunch of caution tape hanging around his room, as well as a caution and keep out sign on his door. So I wanted an item that evoked that same feeling. On top of the small brown dresser, we see a golden circular mirror that looks identical to the one in Animal Crossing. So I added that, and on top of the red tool cart, I added another can of spray paint, as we see one on the red bin in this area from the show. I placed a monitor on the desk near the drums, as we do see some sort of TV or monitor on the desk near the door to his room, alongside a simple green alarm clock, as I wanted another bright item in this room, and he has a clock on his wall, so sure, green alarm clock. On this table, you see a gaming console as well, so I added the Nintendo Switch on the ground near it. As you see the controller on the ground, and I wanted the ground to look cluttered, so I like how it added to the mess. I added some more food scattered around, and as he's into music, I added some headphones on the floor as well. That looks pretty good, but we still have quite a few more items to add to the room before we get to the wall items. The room will look cluttered, but in a good way, you know? I added this cute alien looking gyroid on top of the claw machine, as I thought they looked good together, and added a picture of Audie on top of the shed, as I kind of wanted her to stand in for Wendy because of the red fur, you know? We see Robbie have a bunch of photos of Wendy in his room from when they were dating and when he was obsessed over getting back with her. So I wanted an object to stand in for all those photos, but I placed her up top because he has a new girlfriend now. And next to Audie, I added a cool electric globe. Seems like something Robbie would like and adds some movement to the space. You see a bunch of school posters, stickers, clothing, and other objects around Robbie's room. And since his room originally has a brown carpet, and the space itself feels a bit too plain in the center, I wanted to add a carpet of some kind, and I stumbled upon this gem, which fits perfectly for Robbie's room. It completely fits his personality, don't you think? For Tambry, his current girlfriend, I decided to add some combat boots that look similar to the ones she wears because I wasn't sure what item to stand in for her. A cell phone would have been perfect, but alas, I cannot do that. I scattered a few more snacks, soda cans, and socks around the room, as well as some papers customized with UFO images on the floor and a journal. As we see, Robbie likes to draw, and we see all his apology letters to Wendy scattered on his desk. So why not add a journal, yeah? Well, I think these items have helped to create a cluttered feel, and now we are moving on to the wall items. And as you can imagine, there are a bunch. Robbie's walls are full of posters, caution tape, graffiti, and black lights, so I took all of these items as inspiration when designing his room, but I also added a few other items we see scattered throughout his room, reference items from other episodes, or items I feel like he would own. I wanted the walls to look chaotic and cluttered, but also to show off Robbie's personality and his interests. Alright, let's start with this wall, and I added a bunch of posters that seem to fit well with Robbie's aesthetic. We see skulls, aliens, wolves, snakes, and various band posters in his room. So I tried to pick villager posters that evoke the darker emo punk feel. I also had to include Robbie's famous Stitch heart hoodie on the wall, and 2 more gyroids. One that was a bit strange looking and I liked it, so why not? And another alien looking gyroid, but this time a silver one. The cherry poster is supposed to represent Tambry in a sense. She kind of gives off Tambry vibes, so I placed it near the boots, also meant to represent Tambry. And finally, I added some neon lights around the room to stand in for the black lights, illuminating all the neon graffiti and objects in his room. On wall 2, I added 2 more neon lights, another poster, a cool black and red ninja mask, which just looked cool and added a bit of diversity to the walls, and of course, Robbie's bike. We see his bike outside of the door to his room, but I decided to hang it on the wall instead. Wall 3 includes some fun items. I added this poster that reminded me of the Summerween episode, and it glows and is Halloween-like, so I liked it for Robbie's room. The shelf with the stuffed animals reminded me of when Robbie won that purple platypus for Wendy at the fair. And I mean, come on, look at them. If Robbie were to own any plushies, they'd look like this. One with an eye patch, and the other with his signature broken heart that he wears all the time. They're like emo stuffed animals, and I love them. The Bones suit I placed on the wall is a reference to the Bones sweatshirt he wore during the Summerween episode. We see that Robbie owns at least 1 skateboard, so I added a rack of black and white designer skateboards as decor. I added 2 more posters and a candy skull mask because, once again, you see a bunch of skull-related items in his room. And now onto the last wall, where I have another creepy looking mask to go above Robbie's bed. He has a devil face clock above his bed, so I figured this could stand in for that. I also added another photo of Audie to stand in for Wendy because he had a bunch of photos of Wendy hanging in his room. 2 more random posters, another gyroid that definitely doesn't look like something Robbie would smoke out of to relax, which he definitely needs to do, and 2 more neon lights above his desk. All right, we are almost done, you guys. I added this warning sign on the ceiling as he has a lot of caution tape placed throughout his room, and I thought it would be a nice addition. Now that all the items are placed, let's make this room come to life by turning the lights off. And doesn't it just make the space look 10 times better? All the neons and bright vivid colors stand out really nicely. And we won't be adding any music to the space because unfortunately I cannot turn off the audio for the claw machine or the fighting game, which makes the room sound extremely chaotic, but what can you do? Final touch, I added some lightning to the video game as a reference to when Dipper brings the character to life, and it's always fun to add a bit more kinetic energy to the room. And with that, we have completed Robbie's room and officially completed the last room in the Valentino's home. What do you guys think? I really like how the room turned out, and I think overall, I captured the essence of his room from the show. It's dark and moody and was really fun to recreate. And if you have any suggestions, please feel free to let me know. Your input will end up making this project even better in the end. Now that the Valentino's Funeral Home has been completed, that marks 7 homes that I have designed on my Gravity Falls island. As I've said before, the 8th home and all of the villagers' homes will be kept secret for the island tour to keep things a bit exciting. Even though this island build has been a bit slow, I'm enjoying designing it. It's a lot more work than I ever thought it would be and relies on an enormous amount of reference materials, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. So once again, if you have any suggestions or improvements you can think of for this build, let me know. I always end up missing items or fun references to add to my homes, and I appreciate a second pair of eyes going over my work. And let me know if you'd like to see any outdoor builds for the island, or if you'd prefer that to all be a surprise as well. The outdoor sections are going to be tricky, but I'm up for the challenge. As always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you in the next video.